A Filipina nurse saved a young man's life after losing her job not knowing he was a millionaire and fell madly in love with her. "Somebody help, please! He's still breathing!" Isabella's voice cracked through the downpour, raw with desperation. She knelt on the rain-slicked pavement, her hands pressed against the bleeding chest of a man who had just collapsed at her feet. The streetlights flickered above, casting shaky pools of light onto the deserted street. Cars passed by, their drivers glancing but not stopping. Pedestrians walked faster under umbrellas, pretending not to hear her cries. Her hands trembled, but she didn't hesitate. She ripped off her own coat and pressed it firmly against the gaping wound near the man's ribs. Blood soaked through instantly, warm and terrifying. He was young, probably in his late 20s, his face pale and contorted in pain, even in unconsciousness. His breath came in shallow gasps. "Stay with me," she whispered, glancing around frantically. No sirens, no help, just the rain and her racing heart. She had no medical supplies, no team, no backup, no job. Just 2 days ago, Isabella had been let go from the city hospital. Budget cuts, they said. Her department downsized. She'd begged to stay, even offered to take a pay cut. But it didn't matter. The room where she'd given her heart and hands every day for 5 years had closed its doors on her. Still, none of that mattered now. She tore a strip from her blouse and tied it tightly above the wound, improvising a tourniquet. The man's pulse was faint, but steady. She tilted his head back gently, checking his airway, her training kicking in through the fog of fear. Rain pounded against her back, her knees soaked through. A woman passed by on the opposite sidewalk. Isabella called out again, voice hoarse, "Please, call an ambulance!" The woman glanced once, then hurried away. Isabella blinked away tears. "Cowards," she muttered, and looked back at the man's face. He was handsome, even in pain, strong jawline, thick dark lashes. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. He didn't belong here, lying in the gutter like this. "I won't let you die," she whispered fiercely. "Not tonight." Finally, in the distance, a siren. Her heart lifted. She waved one hand toward the light approaching through the curtain of rain. "Over here, he's bleeding out!" The ambulance screeched to a halt, and 2 paramedics jumped out, immediately moving to her side. "What happened?" one asked, assessing the wound. "Stab wound, left thorax. I applied pressure and a makeshift tourniquet. He's unconscious, shallow breathing but responsive to pain. I'm a nurse. Was," she corrected herself quietly. They nodded and moved efficiently. One of them looked at her with a flicker of something like admiration. "You probably saved his life." Isabella didn't answer. She stepped back as they lifted him onto the stretcher, the blood-soaked coat still clutched in his chest. "Can I ride with him?" she asked, breathless. "Family?" "No," she said, I found him." They hesitated, then shook their heads. "Hospital policy. But thank you, really." She stood on the curb, watching the ambulance disappear into the rain. Her coat was gone. Her clothes clung to her skin, her arms wrapped around herself for warmth. Her body ached, but not as much as her heart. She didn't know who he was, didn't know why he was attacked, or if he had anyone waiting for him. But for those 10 minutes in the storm, he had been her patient, and she had been a nurse again. As the street grew quiet once more, Isabella turned and began walking home, soaked and alone, unaware that the man whose life she'd just saved would soon change hers forever. The morning after the storm, Isabella stood in the cramped kitchen of her tiny rented apartment, staring blankly at the flickering kettle on the stove. The rain from the night before had seeped into her shoes, her bones, and it hadn't left, not really. Her coat was gone, her blouse torn, and her only pair of comfortable shoes stained with blood. She hadn't slept. She couldn't stop seeing his face, pale, bleeding, fading in and out of consciousness. She didn't know his name. She didn't know if he had survived. All she could do was hope. She sipped instant coffee, bitter and too hot, then sat down at the small table where her laptop waited, already open to another job search page. Her inbox was full of rejection emails. "Thank you for your application, but they never even called for interviews anymore." Her nursing license was still valid, but no one wanted to deal with sponsorships. And her visa, it was running out. Only a few weeks left before she'd either have to find a job willing to sponsor her or face deportation. She hadn't told her mother back home. Not yet. Every week she still sent what little she had to her family in the Philippines. Her mother had high blood pressure and her younger brother was in college. They didn't know she had lost her hospital job. She couldn't bring herself to tell them, not when they were still so proud of her. She'd found part-time work under the table at a small diner downtown. Cash only, long hours, no benefits. She cleaned tables, washed dishes, and took orders with a practiced smile. No one there knew she used to be a nurse. She didn't want the questions, the pity. Most nights she got home past midnight. Her back ached, her feet throbbed, but the worst pain came in quiet moments, when she lay in bed and wondered if she had thrown away her future on a stranger, in the rain. She didn't regret helping him, not once, but the not knowing haunted her. Did he survive? She whispered to the ceiling one night. Did I do enough? She had called 3 hospitals the day after, asking if a young man had come in with a stab wound, mid-20s, found on 6th and Allen, but HIPAA laws shut her down. No information could be released. No names, no news, just silence. The memory of his face clung to her, the weight of his body as she pressed her coat to his chest, the look in his eyes before he lost consciousness, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Every time she served a customer at the diner, with dark hair and a strong jawline, she did a double take. Every time the door chimed, her heart jumped, and yet nothing. One evening, as she scrubbed trays in the back of the kitchen, her manager approached. "Bella," he said, calling her by the nickname the staff used. "How long you been here now?" 3 weeks, she replied. "You good, fast, quiet, but I heard you looking for other jobs." She froze. "Only if something with more hours opens up," she lied. He nodded slowly. "We don't ask too many questions here, but immigration's been poking around. Just be careful." She forced a smile, thanked him, then stepped outside during her break and sat on the concrete steps, arms wrapped around her knees. The sky was cloudless, the opposite of the night she met him. But the weight in her chest felt just as heavy. She checked her phone. No missed calls, no emails, just a message from her mother filled with emojis and photos of her brother's school project. She replied quickly, smiling face, thumbs up, "I'm doing great, Ma." The truth was, she didn't know how much longer she could hold on. Without a legal job offer, her days in America were numbered. She had come to this country with dreams. Dreams of healing people, building a future, helping her family. And now she was invisible. Just another immigrant slipping through the cracks. That night she sat by the window of her apartment, listening to the hum of the city, tracing raindrops on the glass with her finger. She thought about going home, about failure, about disappearing. But then she thought of him, the stranger, the man with blood on his lips and pain in his eyes. She had saved him. She had mattered. For 10 minutes on a rainy night she had been exactly who she was meant to be, and somehow that thought was enough to keep her going. For now. The bell above the diner door chimed, and Isabella looked up from the counter where she was refilling the sugar jars. Another customer, probably another regular or someone escaping the summer heat. She offered a polite smile before returning to her task, not paying much attention. But then she felt it. A pause in the room, the kind of silence that makes you look up even when you don't know why. Her eyes met his. He stood just inside the entrance, tall and composed, wearing a dark tailored suit that contrasted with the worn leather messenger bag slung over one shoulder. His hair was neatly styled, his shoes polished, but it wasn't the clothes that caught her breath. It was the face. That face. His. Isabella froze, the sugar jar slipping slightly in her hand. He saw her. His eyes widened, and for a heartbeat he didn't move. Then slowly, as if walking through a memory, he crossed the room. She straightened instinctively, her heart racing. "It's you," he said softly, stopping just a few feet from her. His voice was lower than she remembered, steady but filled with something else. Wonder, maybe. You saved my life." She blinked. "What?" "I remember your face," he said. "That night, the rain." You were there. You kept me alive." Her hands trembled slightly, still clutching the sugar jar. "You remember that?" He gave a small smile. "How could I not?" She stared at him, stunned. He looked nothing like the bloodied, broken man she had knelt beside weeks ago. He was strong now, whole, alive. "You made it," she whispered, almost to herself. "I did," he said. "Because of you." She glanced around. A few customers were watching them curiously. She set down the sugar jar and stepped out from behind the counter. "I didn't know if I wasn't sure if you'd survive." He nodded slowly. "They said another 5 minutes, and I wouldn't have. They told me a woman kept pressure on the wound until the ambulance arrived, but no one got your name." "I'm Isabella." "John," he replied. "John Blake." She nodded slowly. The name didn't register. Just a name. Just a man. But the weight of the moment, it was something more. "I tried to find out," she added. "I called hospitals, but no one would tell me anything." "I've been looking for you too," he said. "Ever since I woke up. I didn't even know your name, but when I walked in and saw your face..." His voice faltered. It was like being pulled back into that night. She didn't know what to say. He glanced around the diner. "Can I buy you a coffee, or are you working?" She hesitated. "I'm on my break." They sat at a booth near the window, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Outside, the city moved along as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside, something had shifted. "Are you okay?" she finally asked. "I mean really okay?" He smiled. "I am now. Took some time, a few surgeries, but I'm here." He looked at her, really looked. "What about you? You're working here?" She lowered her gaze, embarrassed. "Just until I find something else." "You're not a waitress." She looked up sharply. "Excuse me? I mean, you don't move like one. That night, you had training, you knew exactly what to do." "I used to be a nurse," she admitted, quietly, "before I lost my job." John didn't ask why. He didn't pry. He just nodded. "You saved my life," he said again, "and I never got the chance to thank you." "You just did." But something told her this wasn't the last time he'd say those words, and she wasn't wrong. A few days after their reunion at the diner, John invited Isabella to meet him for coffee again, this time at a quiet cafe tucked between 2 art galleries downtown. It was the kind of place she would have never entered on her own, where the air smelled like roasted beans and polished wood, and every corner was designed to make you feel like you belonged somewhere important. She arrived early, nervously smoothing her thrifted blouse, wondering if this was all some strange dream she hadn't woken from. And then he walked in, calm, confident, that same quiet warmth in his eyes. "I'm glad you came," he said, pulling out a chair for her. They ordered, chatted briefly about nothing in particular, before a gentle pause settled between them. John leaned back slightly, exhaled, then fixed his gaze on her. "I think it's time I tell you who I really am." Isabella blinked, unsure what he meant. "My name is John Blake," he said. "As I told you, but what I didn't mention is that I'm the CEO of Blake Tech Systems." She stared. "Blake Tech? As in, the medical technology company?" He nodded. "My father founded it. When he passed, I took over. I've been running it for 4 years now." She felt her breath catch. She had seen that name in articles, in trade journals, the company that developed cutting-edge health monitoring systems, a global leader in digital healthcare. And the man sitting across from her, the one she had wrapped her coat around on a rainy night, was at the helm of it all. "I don't understand," she said. "What were you doing alone in that alley?" "I was running," he said, quietly. "Not physically, spiritually. I'd lost touch with myself. I spent years building a company, chasing acquisitions, throwing myself into meetings and mergers, and somewhere along the way I stopped seeing people." His fingers traced the edge of his coffee cup. "That night I was walking without purpose, no driver, no assistance, just me. I wasn't mugged for my money. They didn't even know who I was. It was random, brutal. And in the moment I was bleeding out, I thought, this is how I go, alone, empty." He looked at her, voice steady, and then you were there." Isabella said nothing. Her heart was pounding. "You saved me," he continued, and something shifted. "Lying in that hospital bed, I thought about everything I had: money, status, power, and how meaningless it felt if I didn't use it for something real." He pulled a slim folder from his bag and slid it across the table. "I'm starting a new initiative under Blake Tech, a foundation focused on bringing primary health care to underserved communities, mobile clinics, nurse-led care, preventive education." Isabella opened the folder slowly. Inside were project outlines, budgets, maps of proposed service areas. "I want you to be part of it," John said. "Not out of charity, not because you saved me, but because I've never seen someone so committed, so instinctively good at what they do." Her eyes lifted. "You barely know me." "I know enough. I know what it takes to stay with a stranger bleeding in the rain. I know what it means to work in a diner just to survive while still dreaming of helping others. I know heart when I see it." She closed the folder slowly, her hands shaking just a little. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said softly. "Let's build something that matters." And in that moment, the world shifted again, for both of them. The first day Isabella walked into the headquarters of the Blake Tech Community Health Foundation, she felt like she had been given a second chance at life. The space buzzed with energy. Young professionals and experienced caregivers worked side by side, planning routes, scheduling visits, designing outreach programs. Everyone moved with purpose, and for the first time in a long while, so did she. She was hired as program coordinator for mobile wellness, a project that would send nurse-led vans into underserved neighborhoods, providing free checkups, health education, vaccinations, and follow-ups for those who had fallen through the cracks of the system. Her first week was overwhelming, learning new systems, attending strategy meetings, speaking in front of donors, but she rose to each challenge with a quiet, growing confidence. The field visits brought her back to life. The moment she stepped into the first mobile clinic, greeted by a grandmother with high blood pressure and a frightened child with a chronic cough, she remembered exactly why she had chosen this path. She wasn't just taking pulses and writing prescriptions. She was restoring dignity. Every day brought a new story: a single mother who hadn't seen a doctor in 5 years, a war veteran living out of his car with untreated diabetes, a teenage girl too ashamed to talk about her symptoms until Isabella sat beside her and simply listened. Each encounter reminded her of who she was. Slowly, the fear of being an outsider faded. Her legal status was now secured under her new employment. Her voice began to carry more weight in meetings, and her name started to circulate among city health leaders. She was no longer invisible. John checked in often, sometimes professionally, sometimes with a quiet smile and a cup of coffee he knew she liked. They worked late on presentations, debated over budget details, laughed about miscommunications during clinic setups, and somewhere along the way the line between boss and colleague, between gratitude and affection began to blur. He never rushed it, never pushed, but she noticed the way he listened when she spoke, how he waited until everyone else had left a meeting just to ask how her day really went, how he remembered the names of the patients she'd talked about, even weeks later. One evening, after a long outreach day in the South District, Isabella sat beside him in the back of the van, both of them sipping lukewarm coffee from paper cups. The city lights blurred outside the windows. "I used to think I came to America to save people," she said, softly. "But I think now I needed saving too." John looked at her for a long moment before replying. "You never needed saving, Isabella. You just needed someone to see you." They fell into an easy silence, filled with something deeper than words. Not romance, not yet. Something more sacred, a recognition. Over the months, her influence within the organization grew. She developed a health literacy curriculum for low-income families. She trained community volunteers. She partnered with local schools to offer mental health support for teens. The mobile clinics doubled in number. Patient outcomes improved dramatically. And soon, newspapers began to take notice. "From diner to director," one headline read, "the nurse who turned her second chance into a lifeline for thousands." One afternoon, she was invited to speak at a city conference on healthcare innovation. As she stepped onto the stage, facing an auditorium of medical professionals, policymakers, and community leaders, she felt no fear, just gratitude. She shared her story, not as a victim, but as a witness to what kindness, resilience, and belief could build. When she finished, the room stood in applause. Afterward, as she stepped backstage, John was waiting. He didn't say anything, just opened his arms. She stepped into them without hesitation. In that embrace, she felt it, not just the warmth of connection, but the full-circle moment she'd never seen coming. The girl who had once bled her soul into a stranger's wound in the rain had become a woman who now healed entire communities. Isabella had found her place in the world again, but more than that, she had found herself. The sky above Manila shimmered with golden light as the plane touched down. From the small oval window, Isabella saw her homeland unfurl beneath her. A patchwork of rice fields, rusted rooftops, and winding streets she knew by heart. It had been nearly 3 years since her last visit, and this time she wasn't coming home alone. John stepped beside her in the narrow terminal, adjusting to the humid air with a curious smile. "So this is it," he said, "the place that made you." She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's not much, but it's everything." They took a slow bus ride from the city, winding through villages where children played barefoot on dusty roads and sari-sari stores lined the corners with faded Coca-Cola signs. The further they traveled, the more John seemed to fall into silence, not from discomfort, but from quiet observation. When they reached her family's town, Isabella's mother was already waiting outside their modest bamboo house, her hands clasped, eyes teary with joy. She hugged her daughter like she was holding a miracle. Isabella introduced John in soft, respectful Tagalog, and though her mother spoke only fragments of English, she welcomed him with warmth that needed no translation. That evening, they sat on woven mats beneath the stars, sharing grilled fish and steaming bowls of rice. Isabella's younger brother, Marco, asked John endless questions about America and technology, while their mother told stories of Isabella's childhood, how she used to bandage neighborhood cats and sneak books home from the clinic. John listened intently, smiling at every detail, absorbing not just the stories, but the soul behind them. Later, as they walked through the village, passing candle-lit homes and children playing with tin cans, John took her hand. "I thought I understood you," he said, "but now I really see you." Isabella looked at him, surprised by the tenderness in his voice. "What do you mean?" "This," he said, gesturing around them. "The way people greet you, the way your mother cooks like she's feeding the world, the way you speak to everyone with the same kindness, whether it's a child or a farmer or your brother." She looked down, a little embarrassed. "It's just where I come from." "It's who you are," he corrected. The next morning they visited the only health outpost in the area, a one-room structure with cracked floors, outdated supplies, and one exhausted nurse who served an entire region on her own. Isabella had warned John, but still, he was visibly moved. As they stepped back outside, John stood in silence for a long time, then turned to her. "What if we built something here?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "A real clinic, with proper equipment, a small team, education programs, preventive care, a place that honors what you've done and where you came from." Her breath caught. "You'd do that?" He nodded. "With you? For them? For you." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't have to do this just because—" "I'm not doing it just because I love you," he said gently. "I'm doing it because loving you means loving everything that made you." She couldn't speak. She just reached for his hand, holding it tight, the sun warm on their faces. In that moment, surrounded by the land that had shaped her and the man who had chosen to build a future with her, Isabella understood something she never thought she would. Love, real love, isn't about escaping where you're from. It's about bringing someone into it and letting them help you lift it higher. The warm, familiar scent of morning rice and Tanglad tea filled the small kitchen as Isabella packed a modest basket of supplies for the local clinic. Outside, John stood near the garden, speaking with a group of local volunteers who had just agreed to help clear the land for the new health center. Everything felt like it was falling into place, like purpose had finally met peace. Then the phone rang. It was John's assistant from New York. His voice was tight, urgent. There had been a breach, an internal data leak affecting one of Blake Tech's most sensitive divisions. The media had caught wind, investors were panicking, and legal teams were scrambling. The board needed John back immediately. When he ended the call, his expression had changed. His shoulders, once loose and relaxed in the rural stillness, were now tense with responsibility. He found Isabella by the water pump, rinsing vegetables for lunch. "I have to go back," he said quietly. She turned to him slowly. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough. It could undo everything we've been building, not just at the company, but at the foundation. I need to face this." She nodded, the smile on her face steady, even as her heart began to shift. "I'll go with you," she said, but he reached out, touching her hand gently. "You don't have to. I want to. But your mother—" He glanced toward the house, where her mother sat humming softly as she folded laundry. "She needs you. You've just started this clinic. These people need you too." Isabella looked down. Her heart tugged in two directions. "I can't ask you to choose," he said, "and I don't want to." She shook her head. "You're not asking, but I still feel like I'm being torn in half." John cupped her face gently, his eyes steady. "Then let's not tear anything. Let's do this the way we've done everything, together, even if we're apart." She blinked back tears. "You think we can make it?" "I know we can." They stood there for a long time in the silence of the village morning. Roosters crowed in the distance, a tricycle buzzed past the road, and somewhere a child laughed. Life was happening. Decisions had to be made. "I'll stay," Isabella said finally, "until the clinic is up and running, until Ma's stronger. I owe her that much." John nodded. "And I'll fix what needs fixing. Then come back. Or you'll come to me. We'll find each other again." They embraced, not with sorrow, but with understanding. This wasn't an ending. It was a promise in motion. At the airport, Isabella stood by the gate as John prepared to board. He kissed her forehead, lingering, as if trying to hold time still. "Remember," he whispered, "this is just one chapter." "I know," she said, smiling through her tears. "I'll see you soon." And as he disappeared through the gate, she whispered it to herself again. "I'll see you soon." The sun rose gently over the hills of Isabella's hometown, casting a golden light across the newly finished health center. The building stood proud in the middle of the village, a modest but sturdy structure painted in soft whites and blues, with the words Kalanaw Health Center written above the entrance. Kalanaw Peace. A name chosen by Isabella herself. Villagers arrived in their best clothes, some with woven baskets of food, others with hand-painted signs and garlands of fresh flowers. Children ran barefoot through the grass, laughter filling the air. The whole community had gathered for this day, a celebration not just of a building, but of hope, resilience, and love. Isabella stood near the steps of the health center, wearing a simple dress in the color of the sea. Her mother held her hand tightly, tears already shimmering in her eyes. Marco helped arrange chairs under the canopy, while elders took their places in the front rows. It had taken a year of planning, fundraising, training, and countless sleepless nights, but the dream had finally come true. She had received John's support from afar, donation letters, legal paperwork, video calls of encouragement, but since he returned to New York, they hadn't seen each other in person. He had stayed true to his word, always present in spirit, though the miles between them often ached in her chest. A soft voice called her name. The mayor stepped up to the small wooden stage and beckoned her to join. "Come, Miss Isabella. This is your moment." She walked to the front, heart full, head high. The crowd quieted as she approached the microphone. "I came back home with nothing but a dream," she began, voice clear. "This clinic was born not from wealth or power, but from compassion, from remembering what it feels like to be seen and to be helped when you least expect it." The villagers applauded warmly. "I dedicate this center to every mother who walked hours just to get medicine, to every child who waited for a doctor who never came, and to those who believe that healing can begin anywhere, even in the smallest places. She stepped back, tears clinging to the edge of her smile. Then, without warning, the music shifted. A soft murmur spread through the crowd. From the back of the gathering, a man appeared, tall, familiar. Isabella froze. John. He wore a linen shirt and dark slacks, his hair slightly tousled from travel, but his eyes had not changed. They met hers across the crowd, and in that one look, the past year folded into nothing. He walked toward the stage slowly, villagers parting in quiet awe, whispering to one another. He carried something in his hand. The applause began to rise again. Isabella's heart beat so loud she could hardly hear it. John climbed the steps and took the microphone from the mayor, who stepped aside with a knowing smile. He turned to the crowd, then to Isabella. "Some of you may not know me," he said, "but this woman saved my life. Quite literally, not just from bleeding on a city street, but from living a life without direction, without heart." The audience leaned in. She didn't know who I was. She didn't ask for anything. She gave everything she had, not because she had to, but because it was in her nature to help. And from that moment, my life changed. He turned fully toward her now, pulling something from his pocket, a small velvet box. Gasps echoed around them. He knelt. Isabella's hand flew to her mouth. "The woman who once saved my life." John's voice cracked, but his eyes never wavered. "Will you now let me spend mine with you?" The crowd erupted in applause, cheers, and tears. Isabella's legs wobbled. Her heart, full to the brim, spilled over in sobs. She knelt with him, took his face in her hands, and nodded through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, and the world seemed to pause, just for a moment, at the beauty of it all. Laughter, music, and dancing followed. Children tossed petals into the air. The whole village celebrated not only a new health center, but a love story that had crossed continents and storms. As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long golden shadows over the clinic, Isabella stood on the porch beside John, watching the lanterns float into the sky. She leaned into him and whispered, "You didn't just give me a future. You brought me home." And as he kissed her hand, the inscription on the new clinic glowed beneath the fading sun. Love doesn't need to find a perfect place. It begins from the most sincere place, from a giving heart. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey of love, sacrifice, and second chances. Isabella's story reminds us that even in our lowest moments, kindness has the power to heal, to build, and to bring two souls together across oceans and against all odds. If this story moved your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories, where true stories like this come to life and touch the deepest parts of who we are. We believe that every act of compassion creates a ripple, and every story shared brings us one step closer to understanding each other. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never stop believing in the power of a giving heart.